All right, hello there, Year 8. It's Mrs. Gotham here. Welcome to video number 4 for English for Term 5. I hope you and your families are all doing well. Well done if you've made it to this point. You've got through videos 1 to 3 and you're now ready to do video 4, which is all about putting all of your ideas together to do a final piece of writing that you'll be submitting to your teacher. So, quick reminder then that we're doing writing to express a viewpoint at the moment. So we're giving our opinions on real life issues, things that might affect you. And we're basing all of these pieces of writing all around our big questions. So today's lesson is where our big questions are really going to come into play. You'll see that every piece of writing that I'm going to ask you to do today will be something to do with one of these big questions. So keep an eye out for that as you're going through the lesson. So as a reminder, why does society reject people who are different? How do writers present the treatment of different groups of people, and what conclusions should be drawn from this? What are the consequences of keeping people on the outside of society? See if you can spot those questions or those issues somewhere in today's lesson. So, as I said, lesson number 4 is all about putting all of our learning so far together to produce a final piece of writing. So let's start with a quick recap of what we've actually covered so far this term in our lessons 1 to 3. So lesson 1 was all about vocabulary. You were looking at 15 different words that you could use to make a really strong point. We looked at words such as galvanised, inspired, imperative, and we were looking at examples of how we could write sentences with those. The second week was on cohesive devices. So we were looking at different ways we could link our writing together using connectives, repeated keywords, synonyms and pronouns. And then we did some practice writing with those. And then lesson number 3 was all about there's techniques, so different techniques we can use to persuade our readers that our view is correct. So tricolon, hyperbole, emotive language, imperative, rhetorical question, and statistics. And we looked particularly at 3 of those and focused on those, looked at some examples, and you did some practice around those as well. So I'm going to be asking you to use all 3 of these lessons to help you with this lesson today. So we're going to start off with some practice putting it all together. So before actually doing a paragraph, we're just going to build up towards a paragraph. And this is just to practice to make sure that you're confident, you know what you're doing, and you know how to put all of those skills together in practice. So in a minute, I'm going to give you a starter sentence. That's going to be the first sentence of our paragraph. And the task is I'm going to ask you to add 3 sentences to this starter sentence, just 3 at the moment. So this is we're building towards a paragraph here. Probably a paragraph would generally be longer than 3 or 4 sentences, but we're going to just start off with this to practice. I'm going to ask you in the 3 sentences you add to include at least one there's technique. I'm going to ask you in those 3 sentences to develop on and explain what the there's technique means or shows. It's really important that our paragraphs don't just become a list of there's techniques. They do actually need to kind of be explained and developed upon. I'm going to ask you to use in those 3 sentences as many cohesive devices as you can. And I'm going to ask you to try and use at least one of the vocabulary words. And if you need a reminder of those, then make sure you've downloaded the knowledge organiser, which is attached to the homework. All right, so before I'm going to ask you to do this, I'm going to give you some examples. So let's start off. This is going to be our first starter sentence. These days, young people are more under pressure than ever before. So here's our success criteria in the white box, just to remind you what we're doing. So we're going to have to add 3 sentences to this starter sentence. Okay, so I'm going to show you a waggle, one that I've already written before the lesson started, and then I'm going to do a live model for you. And I'm going to show you how just by changing the there's technique you add, you can make quite a different paragraph, even though the starter sentence is the same. Once we've gone through the waggle and I've done the live model for you, you're then going to have a go at using the same starter sentence to write or add 3 sentences to. All right, so let's start with the waggle then. So we know that we need to add 3 sentences, and we know that one of them's got to include a there's technique. So I decided to add my there's technique first onto my starter sentence in this waggle. So I decided to add a tricolon. They have to be the perfect children, hardworking students, and flawless friends. So why is this a tricolon? Because it's got 3 things in a list: perfect children, hardworking students, flawless friends. All right, so I've got my there's technique. So I now need to develop on and explain what this means or shows. And I know that I need to add 2 more sentences because I've already added one. So my next sentence I added was, all this expectation is likely to cause some difficulty at a time when they are starting to become adults and figure out their own identities. So I developed on my there's technique and explained it, what this expectation is actually going to lead to. And notice when I did this, I was using cohesive devices as well, or this expectation. So rather than kind of repeating what I'd said, I used a pronoun here, this, and I developed on it and explained kind of what it's actually going to cause. And I know that I've got to add one more sentence because I've added 2, so I need one more. So I added, it is therefore imperative that as a society we try to reduce this pressure. So notice here that I've used a connective, my cohesive device. I've used therefore to develop my point. I've used a vocab word, imperative, from our knowledge organiser list as well. So here is my waggle paragraph then, or short paragraph. We're just practicing with short ones at the moment. So you can see I've got the starter sentence, I've added my there's technique, and then I've added some more sentences to develop and explain that. Alright, so if you need a minute to pause the video here and just read over that waggle again, that's absolutely fine. If you also need to pause and rewind at this point and just go back through that to see how I formed the waggle, that's absolutely fine as well if you need to do that. Okay, so hopefully you've had a chance to pause, just had a read over that, made sure you're clear what I've done in the waggle. So I'm now going to come out of PowerPoint and I'm going to do a live model for you with this second one. So again, look how I've got the same sentence starter here, or starter sentence here, as I had here. Exactly the same. So I'm now going to add on, but I'm going to add a different there's technique this time. So over here, I did a tricolon. I'm going to decide that on this one, I'm going to do a rhetorical question. I'm going to ask a question about pressure on young people. So I'm going to do something like, what would be causing them to feel this way? So I've got a question here, then a rhetorical question that I'm asking. Notice that rather than repeating young people, I'm using the pronoun them as a cohesive device. Right, so I've got my there's technique. I now need to add 2 more sentences to make 3 in total. And I'm going to be developing on and explaining this. So as I've got a rhetorical question, what would be causing them to feel this way? I'm probably going to try and answer my question for my readers. So I think in this one, I'm probably going to argue about social media being something that can cause one of those pressures. I know that I've spoken to quite a lot of you about feeling pressure, about how you have to be or appear online. So I might answer my rhetorical question something like, I would argue that it's likely to be the mounting pressure of social media. Okay, so notice that rather than saying, again, pressure, I've got it, rather than repeating pressure twice in my sentence. But notice also that I'm using the repeated keyword pressure from earlier on in the paragraph as well. So thinking about cohesive devices there. All right, so I now need 1 more sentence because I've done 2. So I probably want to develop on this by saying about why I think social media is causing so much pressure. So I've talked to lots of you about how you feel that social media can make you want to change yourselves to appear more like the people that you see on social media. I know that can be quite a pressure to kind of appear like you have the perfect life, like people you see on Instagram. So I might write about this in my last sentence. So something like, this modern invention makes them feel forced to change, or I could have, rather than change, I could have modify, which I know is one of our vocab words from the knowledge organiser. It means the same thing. Parts of themselves, which, adding on my ideas with a connective, don't fit with the perfect ideal shown online. Okay, so I've taken my idea then about what is damaging or pressurizing about social media, and I've explained that in this sentence, and I've used one of the vocabulary words as well. All right, so it's your turn now. Again, you're going to be using the same starter sentence. Remember the success criteria. So once you've copied down the starter sentence, you're going to add 3 sentences. One of them's got to include a there's technique. I've already done tricolon and rhetorical question. You're welcome to do those as well, as long as you do a different one, or you could do one of the other there's techniques. And then your other sentences should develop on and explain what the there's technique means and what it shows, as I've done here and here. I'm trying to use as many cohesive devices as you can as you write this mini paragraph, and you're going to try and use at least one of the vocabulary words. So I'd like you to pause the video here then, Year 8. You're going to write your own mini paragraph starting with this sentence starter, and remember to use the waggle on the live model as a kind of guide of what you're aiming to write. Okay, so thank you for rejoining Year 8. Hopefully you've had a go at writing a mini paragraph adding to that sentence starter. So well done if you've had a go at that. So I'm going to go back into PowerPoint mode now, presenter mode, and we're going to be doing some more practice now before I get you to have a go at doing a longer paragraph. So we're going to do exactly the same thing that we've just done, but we're going to do it with a new starter sentence to practice this again. So our new starter sentence this time is bullying is one of the most unacceptable behaviours that exists. So we're going to write our paragraph or mini paragraph this time all around the issue of bullying. So exactly the same thing, I'm going to ask you to add 3 sentences to this starter sentence. I'm going to ask you to include one there's technique. I'm going to ask you to develop on and explain what the there's technique shows, probably with a few sentences. Use as many cohesive devices as you can, and try to use at least one of the vocabulary words. So I'll give you a chance to pause the video now then. Remember that we're writing another mini paragraph, just this time with a new starter sentence about bullying. Alright, so hopefully Year 8 you've paused the video and you have written now another mini paragraph all on the subject of bullying using this starter sentence. So whilst you were doing that, I was having a go at doing one of mine, so I'll share that with you if you would like to compare yours with mine and see whether there were similarities between what we did. So here is my paragraph then. So I had bullying is one of the most unacceptable behaviours that exists. It makes those who are bullied feel worthless and damages their self-esteem potentially far into the future. This is because bullies often pick up on the things that people are already self-conscious about, like the way they look. Having these flaws picked out by another person can just confirm your deepest and darkest anxieties, leaving you languish in self-doubt and introspection. Oh, whoops. Okay, so as you can see then, I've used the starter sentence here about bullying. The next sentence I added was some emotive language for my there's technique here, trying to make people feel sorry for those who are bullied. And then I've added 2 other sentences onto that, just to explain and develop my point there about why bullying can be so damaging. So you can see I've got cohesive devices here, like this is because. I've got repeated keywords like bullies and bullying. I've also used quite a number of vocab words here from our knowledge organiser. So I've used 2. I've used languish and I've used introspection. So introspection is the noun version of introspective, which is on the knowledge organiser. Introspective is an adjective, so it wouldn't really fit here. We wouldn't say languish in self-doubt and introspective. That wouldn't make sense. so we have to use a noun form here. So I've used introspection to fit better there. So that was my one. So if you would like to take a minute now just to pause and have a read back through yours and see if yours was similar to mine, if you've managed to include all the success criteria. And then when you're ready, you can just unpause the video and move on. We're going to develop and build on this further. All right, so hopefully you're ready then to build up this mini paragraph into a longer one. Generally, we probably want a paragraph to be a bit longer than 4 sentences. So we do want to build up on it. So how would I do that if I wanted to build up? So I would keep adding other theirs techniques, remembering, of course, to explain and develop each. I would keep linking my ideas using cohesive devices and keep using vocabulary words where and when they fit. But also remembering that I do need to start a new paragraph if I'm switching to a different side of the argument. So if I start to talk about a different aspect of bullying, for example, like how or why people bully, then I'm talking about a different side of bullying and therefore I'd need a new paragraph. So I'm going to show you a little bit what this would look like, how I would go on to develop my piece. I'm going to take my one from earlier again about the pressures on young people. So you remember that this is my waggle from earlier, my mini paragraph, where I had my starter sentence, my tricolon, and then my 2 sentences to add to that. So if I wanted to develop it further, I could add on something like this. So if we don't, it could have a disastrous impact on the future of our young people, possibly even impacting their mental health and confidence in themselves. Surely we want young people who feel empowered to be themselves and to envision their life as they want it, rather than forcing them to modify their behaviour for us. So let's just talk through what I've kind of added on here, how I've added on to my mini paragraph from earlier and made it into a longer paragraph. So I've added another theirs technique. Again, I've chosen to use emotive language here to make us feel sorry for the impact on younger people. I have also used some vocabulary words. I've used quite a few here. I've used envision, I've used modify, and I've used empowered as well. So I've used several in this paragraph extension of the vocabulary words. And also you'll notice that I've got some cohesive devices all the way through there. So I've got pronouns like it and their, rather than repeating young people. I've got some connectives as well to link our ideas together, like if we don't is a nice connective phrase. And I've also got some different repeated keywords in here. I keep going back to this idea of young people and the effect on them. Alright, so if I wanted to develop this even further, I might go on to talk about a different aspect of this. So if I'm going to do that, then I need to start a new paragraph. So that was what I did. I wanted to continue talking about pressure, but I didn't want to kind of be talking about how it affects young people. I wanted to talk about how we can actually overcome this problem. So in order to do that, I had to start a new paragraph. I'm talking about a different aspect. I started my new paragraph with a rhetorical question. So, but how do we go about this and still inspire them to succeed? I would argue that we must listen to young people in order to understand the ways they are feeling and what we could do to further help them grow. This doesn't mean they will always make the right choices, but after all, growing up is as much about learning as anything else. So because I wanted to talk about what I can actually do about the problem, I had to start a new paragraph. And I'm following the same kind of rules here. I'm using a theirs technique, and then I'm developing on that with a few sentences, making sure I'm continuing to use cohesive devices as well as I go through. Okay, so this is kind of a full piece that you're going to be aiming to do. So look at how I've built up that quite simple structure, just the kind of 3 or 4 sentences, into a longer paragraph, and then also, if you want, into a second paragraph looking at a different aspect of the issue as well. Alright, so now using this to help you, you're going to do the final piece. So I'm going to give you the task and I'm going to give you the success criteria for this final piece as well. And then you're going to have a go at writing it. So you're aiming to write 1 to 2 paragraphs, remembering that paragraphs should probably be about 6 or 7 sentences long at least, and you can use that method to help you build them up. Just start with kind of 3 or 4 and then build from there. If you want to do a second paragraph, that's absolutely fine, like I did in the waggle. You're going to use theirs techniques. Remember that you don't need to use them all, but when you do use them, that you're going to make sure you're explaining and developing what they show you. You're using as many cohesive devices as you can. And I want you to try in this to use at least 3 of the vocabulary words if you can. And then obviously at the end, when you finish writing, carefully check your punctuation and spelling. So you're going to start your paragraph with one of these starter sentences. So just pick kind of one to form your argument around. And you'll notice that they're all based around our big questions, which I reminded you all about earlier. So you're choosing one of these. The fact we still have racism in our society today is shocking. It's time we stop judging people by the way they look. Our differences shouldn't define the way we treat people. It is an upsetting truth that today women are still not equal to men. Having a disability or special need should not define who you are. So you're picking one of those that's going to be your starter sentence to help you write your 1 to 2 paragraphs. So you've got your success criteria, the task, and a starter sentence. Remember, if you need some further help, you can rewind the video and look again at any of the waggles from today's lesson, and they should help you show you what you're really aiming at producing. So I imagine that this piece of writing will probably take you around 20 minutes to half an hour, depending on how quick you are at writing. You're obviously allowed to spend more time on it if you want. Make it as good as it can possibly be, because you are going to be submitting this work to your teacher for marking. So when you think you've finished writing your 1 to 2 paragraphs, you can come back and join me here just for the final bit of the video explaining what you need to do with your work. Okay, so well done Year 8. If you've paused and written your 1 to 2 paragraphs, I hope that you found that building up towards them by just using mini paragraphs first was a helpful strategy to help you to do that. So what I'd really like you to do now then, please, is to highlight or label your 1 to 2 paragraphs. And I would like you to highlight or label them using the success criteria above. So can you point out, please, for your teacher, where are the theirs techniques that you've used? Can you point out, please, where you've developed on those theirs techniques and explained them? Can you point out to your teacher, please, where you've used cohesive devices in your work? Can you point out to your teacher, please, where at least you've used 3 of the vocabulary words in your work? And you can either make a key and do this with colours, or you can label it by writing down the margins. So when you've labelled and highlighted your work using the success criteria, you can unpause the video, and then we'll just finish off with the final thing for today. Alright, Year 8, so hopefully now you've got a labelled or highlighted piece of writing where you've met all of the success criteria elements. So, what are you actually going to do with this beautifully highlighted, labelled piece of work, writing to express your viewpoint? So what I'd like you to do, please, is submit your work on Show My Homework to your English teacher. If you've typed it, you're just going to upload the document. Doesn't matter what kind of document it is, Word, PowerPoint, either is fine. If you've handwritten it, can you take a picture, please, and upload it using your phone? It should allow you to do that through the Show My Homework app. And then your teacher will be marking your work and giving whole class feedback on that. So if you have any issues uploading your work, just send a comment into your teacher via Show My Homework. But please make sure that you've uploaded your work by the deadline so that your teacher can start marking. Alright, Year 8, so well done for today's lesson. We're now at the end of the lesson. So hopefully you had a good time today. You enjoyed putting everything that you've learned into practice today to make this final piece of writing that I hope you're really, really proud of, and are really going to be really proud to submit it to your teacher. I'm sure they're going to be looking forward to reading it and to giving some feedback. I hope you enjoy the rest of your week. Stay safe, and I will see you on the next video.